So when it comes to interviewing serial killers and mass murderers, it always gains a huge viewing. There's just something about it that intrigues people to wonder how can someone be this evil and commit those crimes. Which is why serial killer documentaries and killer documentaries are so popular, whether it's on YouTube, Netflix, or TV shows. But what if I can show you 10 murderers that gave TV interviews before being arrested? Hello everybody, welcome back to World of Crime. In this video, we're going to be discussing 10 convicted murderers who gave TV interviews before being arrested. Starting with number 10, we have Stephen McDaniel. Now, the first interview with Stephen McDaniel, he was answering questions about the disappearance of his neighbor, Lauren Giddings. The video starts with McDaniel offering potential explanations for what happened to his friend. But about a minute in, the reporter informs him that the police have discovered a body during the process of their investigation. Upon hearing this news, McDaniel breaks from the interview and sits on the grass to collect his thoughts. A reaction that many people at the time probably confused with grief. He then continues the interview, clearly showing signs of panic and distress as he realizes his life as a free man is about to end. Just hours after the interview, police searched McDaniel's room. They reported that he was behaving erratically, sweating profusely, and that he drank 10 bottles of water in the time that they were there. Investigators would eventually discover evidence linking him to the crime. After being arrested and held in custody for 10 months, he confessed to strangling and dismembering Lauren.
Did you see her hang out with anyone at the time or anything like that?
No one has seen her since Saturday. I haven't seen anything. I've always seen noise outside, but it's just people walking by pretty much.
Number 9, we have Matthew Harvey. So in this video, Matthew Harvey is being interviewed by journalists outside his Bradford County home on June 2018. That morning, a body had been discovered in a nearby creek, which had led the news teams investigating local residents to get some idea of the circumstances surrounding the grisly discovery, and Harvey talks casually on camera about what he thinks happened, speculating that the body could have been dumped in the river after a hit. He even talks about how concerned his mother would be about the situation. Despite his outlandish theories regarding the origin of the corpse and his apparent concern for his mother's feelings, it turns out that Harvey knew exactly what had happened to the victim, and that he was responsible. The victim was the very mother that he had concern for, who was found to have died of blunt force trauma to the head before she was dumped in the creek.
I think it was kind of a hit and something happened. Something went bad, and this is like a rural area, so they just wanted to plant the body somewhere else.
Coming in at number 8, we have Brian Hawkins. So in 1993, Brian Hawkins, along with Curtis Culver and his sister Shannon, abducted and murdered a 20-year-old man named Frank McAllister. Frank's car was found abandoned in Costco parking lot, and detectives reported that there was so much blood inside the car they knew foul play was highly probable. Now, very little evidence was recovered, so the investigation went cold for almost a year before a hiker discovered Frank's remains in a rural part of Shingletown. Investigators now knew that Frank was deceased, but the details of his demise remained a secret for nearly 25 years. In the video, Hawkins explains that he, along with 2 companions, lured Frank to an isolated area where they stabbed him to death and robbed him. Hawkins claims that God wanted him to confess to the murder. After conducting this interview, he turned himself into the nearest police station, told them the same story, claiming that his life had totally been ruined by committing this brutal crime.
This has to be the right thing. I'm going to turn myself in next door at the sheriff's department for a crime I was involved in years ago.
Coming in at number 7, we have Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader is probably someone you heard about. In 1991, Dennis Rader was interviewed on the local news show about animal attacks for his job as a dog catcher. The team that were doing the interview could have never known they were actually talking to the BTK killer, which is bind, torture, and kill. He's a former church leader who was responsible for at least 10 murders in Kansas by the time this interview was aired. Rader used his position as a compliance officer to satisfy his need for control, and the fact that he was a commissioned officer who carried a badge and a gun probably added to the sense of invulnerability that he felt getting away with multiple murders over 30 years, all while sending taunting letters and poems to the authorities and local media outlets. Eventually, Rader's mocking of law enforcement became his undoing, as he unwittingly gave away his identity by sending a floppy disk to the local news stations. The metadata was used from the documents on the disk to confirm Rader was the BTK killer. In August 2005, he was sentenced to 10 life sentences and a minimum of 175 years without the possibility of parole. Number 6, we have Ian Huntley. On Sunday, August 4th, 2002, 10-year-old school friends Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman disappeared after leaving a family barbecue. The search for the girls garnered national media attention, but there was no sign of them despite multiple appeals to the public for information. 10 days later, an investigative team of journalists was constructing the girls' last known movements when they stopped outside the house of Ian Huntley. He was a caretaker at the local school and last known person to see the girls alive. Now, this video clearly shows a man who was comfortable with deception. Huntley calmly explained his fictional account of the last time he saw the girls in much the same way you can imagine him telling the police during numerous times that they questioned him previously. Just a few days after this was filmed, Ian Huntley and his girlfriend Maxine were arrested on suspicion of murder. It was eventually revealed that one of the girls had suffered a nosebleed while walking past Huntley's house. He lured them both inside under the pretense of helping them clean up before brutally murdering them both. His girlfriend Maxine, a teaching assistant at the girls' school, was sentenced to 3.5 years for conspiring to pervert the course of justice.
Evening in. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
Well, I don't know the girls. I stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good, as she hadn't got the job. And they just said, please tell her that we're very sorry. And off they walked in the direction of the library over there.
Coming in at number 5, we have Gerald Baden Clay. So this video shows the moment that Gerald faced news cameras in Australia to plead for his wife Alison's safe return after she was reported missing in April 2012. It had been 3 days since he had murdered his wife and dumped her body on a creek bank, but it would take the authorities another week to finally discover her remains. When this video was shot, Clay was a suspect just like everyone else, and it took 2 weeks for police to complete their investigation after someone found Alison's body. A postmortem failed to prove how she died, but Clay was still charged with murder and interfering with the corpse. He was found guilty 2 years later and sentenced to life in prison, despite his pleas that he was innocent. The investigation revealed that Alison's life was insured for over $500,000. The couple had been on diverging financial paths as Gerald's business had suffered badly during the recent floods, while she was forging a successful career for herself as an executive for Flight Center. It was also revealed that Clay had a mistress, and some people suggested the murder was an attempt to start a new life without his wife.
We really trust that the police are doing everything they can to find my wife, and we just hope that she'll come home soon.
Coming in at number 4, we have probably one of the most popular ones you guys see, one of the most popular cases, and I probably will do a separate video just on this guy alone, but Chris Watts. On August 13, 2013, Shannon Watts and her 2 young children were reported missing by her close friend after failing to show up for an appointment or responding to her text messages. The next day, Shannon's husband Chris appeared on 2 Denver TV channels pleading for his family's safe return. However, he did not really show the kind of emotional response one might expect from a man whose loved ones were missing and presumed in danger. From the video, you can judge his demeanor for yourself. But the very next day after this interview was conducted, Chris Watts was arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife, 2 children, and his 3rd unborn child, who Shannon was pregnant with at the time. It was discovered that Chris was having an affair and had decided to kill his wife and children after an argument about getting a divorce. He eventually confessed to the murders after failing a polygraph test on November 19, 2013. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole.
Right now you got K9 units, the sheriff's department, everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent, see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere.
At number 3, we have Margaret and Neil Archer. So Margaret and Neil Archer are a murderous mother and son duo from South Australia. They reportedly made pleas on TV for the safe return of Neil's girlfriend, Jodie Mayers, even though they had already murdered her and buried her body under a concrete floor in their shed. The video shows the full extent of the moronic pair efforts to deceive police, media, and the police, while at the same time revealing their terrible crime to investigators by using Jody's credit cards and cell phone. In September 15, nearly a month after Jody was reported missing, detectives swoop in on the Archer property, found her remains under a freshly poured concrete shed floor, and Neil was given 22 years for the murder and his mother was sentenced to 6 years for her role in attempting to help her son cover his tracks.
Someone that's out there but knows anything to contact the police or Crime Stoppers.
Well, if she is listening, I just want her to know that we all do love her and miss her dearly, and we would really like her to come home.
Number 2, we have Miles Evans. So this video shows Miles Evans, a army truck driver from the UK who smothered his 9-year-old stepdaughter to death. Attempting to convince the general public that he is desperate for her safe return, hours before he appeared in this plea alongside the girl's mother, Evans had help in searches despite already knowing her fate. In the video, Evans' body language is analyzed by experts who explain the clear signs that he is being deceptive. He was convicted of murder in 1998 and sentenced to life in jail, although he was always denied the allegations against it. During the trial, the prosecution declared him to be a callous killer who took his stepdaughter, Zoe, in the middle of the night and may have sexually abused her. The post-mortem revealed that she had died from suffocation after a t-shirt had been used to gag her. She was also punched in the face before being dumped in a badger den and partially buried near her family home.
So we all really do want you to come home. We all love you at home.
And then coming in at number 1, we have Christy Abrahams. So Keisha Abrahams was a vulnerable and defensive 6-year-old girl living with her mother, Christy, and her mother's partner, Robert Smith. When she was brutally murdered in her family home, Keisha had suffered months of abuse, including being punched in the face, bitten, burned by cigarettes, and eventually killed by the blow to the head that came from her mother. Now, Abraham reported her daughter missing a few days after she murdered her and continued the charade for 8 months while authorities searched everywhere for the young girl. She even appeared on TV alongside her ex-husband to tearfully answer questions for the media and increase awareness of the case. The TV appeal made by Christy was recorded a few weeks after the murder, and apparently distraught mother is seen pleading for her daughter's safe return, knowing the whole time that her daughter's body had been stuffed in a suitcase and burned before being buried in a shallow grave. Christy was sentenced to 22 years behind bars for murder, while Robert Smith was sentenced to at least 12 years for his part in the despicable treatment of a helpless child.
Robert, do you want to speak on behalf of Christy?
What would you like to say, mate?
If there's anyone out there that knows or seen anything, just come forward, contact the police.
What have the last 3 days?
It would really help.
So hearing all this, it's probably tough to know who you can trust these days. People you think are victims can really be the perpetrators, and you don't know what's going on anymore. But in the end, most of the time they do get caught because they bring so much attention to themselves, and the people will figure it out. But if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up. Make sure you guys comment your thoughts on this, and which case do you think was the most shocking?